and name it.
I like it. You should hit us with one. If you can come up with a good one.
Next time in 2025.
Oh,
That's the
there you go.
2025 policy.
Welcome, Rick. Good to see you. Nancy,
Oh,
Desiree,
yeah,
welcome.
sorry. Yeah, here I am somewhere.
Good.
So there's a little button with a thing on it. Okay.
There she is.
You're good. You're good.
I still remember how to do that.
Oh, welcome.
Thank you.
We'll give it just another minute for others who are joining. We'll jump into a few slides and share the agenda with everyone. Is everyone ready for Christmas? The clock is ticking.
Yeah,
No.
I'm totally ready.
Totally ready?
Totally ready. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
My kids don't expect anything until about March. It's usually by then I can make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. So it's just interesting, all the different traditions that people have and the way that people can gather. There's one small town near me in it's called the town of Salzburg. It's about a half an hour away from me, and it's usually the first Sunday of the month. But I stumbled on it this past Sunday, so it had gotten delayed this year. They have it's an old canal town, and they have a paved brick canal that everybody adopts a Christmas tree, all the families and businesses in town, and they set up the trees, and then everyone comes out at 4 o'clock on that day and decorates together at the same time with music being piped, and the local civic organizations have cookies and hot chocolate, and there's a Santa in a hut that gives away like big toy. I mean, it is the most movie-like experience for this real small town. I stumbled on it years ago, and I've pointed a couple people that direction. It's just a great way to get that Christmas spirit revved up. So, yeah, I'm ready.
That's great.
It's fun to watch when the community comes out and connects, and any time that those things can happen. So, Spencer, good to see you. Welcome.
Hello. Hello all.
Bob, John, Brian, and David. Great. Welcome, everyone. Glad everyone's here. There might be a few more joining us based on the RSVPs, but I want to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to just share my screen with the agenda for tonight. So it's a general welcome, and we want to move into just a Pennsylvania pro-democracy collaboration moment. And I'll explain a little bit about what that is, and then I'm going to invite one or two of you to maybe share some of your interactions with some of the other groups across PA. We're going to talk about what politics is and what we can do about what politics is, and then after that, take some time for Q&A. And this, for me, is really kind of last month we talked about what we've accomplished in 24, what our goals are for 25, and this is just a different way of covering that same subject about what we've learned and what we can do to address it and take action moving forward in 2025. Then there are a couple of action steps that I'm going to invite people to take after the meeting. And then, of course, we just want to make sure that everyone goes off in a cheery mood and enjoys the holidays. So Pennsylvania Pro-Democracy Collaboration is an unofficial group with not a strictly defined membership, but there are leaders from different organizations across the state that met half a dozen times over this past year just to try to keep one another informed about the actions and activities that everyone is doing to help inspire democracy and make sure that that's protected and that the voters' voices are represented. This is meant to be organic, something that grows, something that, again, it's an unofficial thing, but we really think that by being aware of one another's activities and getting to support each other through the efforts that we do, That's how we're going to really be able to make a difference here in PA. So I've listed some of the different groups that we've had some good conversations with and a lot of cross-pollination of members. And one of the groups that listed right on top is the Fair Districts of Pennsylvania. And I was lucky enough to have time available to travel out to their conference earlier this month. There was a number of other Pennsylvania Fortists, a couple that are on the call tonight that were able to make that trip as well. So I don't know.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Christian.
We'll take care of it.
Can everyone please mute, except for whoever's speaking?
Thank you,
Thanks,
Nancy.
Nancy.
I was about to jump in there too.
So Rick or David, if one of you would want to jump in, I'm not sure if Nancy's here, and just maybe share a couple thoughts about your experience at Fair Districts PA conference.
Who would like to go first?
That sounds like you, David.
If anybody is in the Slack, I posted a more detailed summary of my thoughts there. So I'm going to glance to the left and skim over that now to remind myself of what might be worth mentioning. One just side note, I kind of had an epiphany through talking with people there, and that shows some of the value of getting out there and speaking with people about the Forward Party in different settings. Those different conversations provoke spontaneous thoughts to think about the Forward Party, sometimes in different ways. Fair Districts PA is some sort of a nonprofit organization, if I'm not mistaken. Regardless of how exactly they're defined, it was very clear at some of the presentations that they have to try very hard to be nonpartisan. And it struck me that that's one of the things that makes the Forward Party special. I've sometimes had trouble answering the question in the past when people ask me, if your party is so concerned with reforms like ranked choice voting and all that, why aren't you a nonprofit group? Why aren't you just an activist group? Why are you a party? And I realized that one of the advantages, if not maybe the advantage, the central advantage of Forward being a party, is that we don't have to be nonpartisan. We actually can endorse candidates, our own candidates, or like-minded Republicans and Democrats who align with our values. And that gives us a level of freedom that the nonprofit organizations don't seem to have, because we don't have to continually put forward that air of nonpartisanship. We are actually allowed to have skin in the game. I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of what's saying here. I just rushed home, so I didn't get my thoughts together. I apologize.
No, you're doing great.
So another thing, I posted on there that I wore a shirt that I'd made myself that said, "Ask me about the Forward Party," and it had some of the election reform stuff on there. And that did start a couple of good conversations. So did some of the questions that I brought up during sessions and the like. And that struck me as a positive contrast with my experience canvassing with the Democrats for Cameron Shroy. Because, you know, if I told some of the Democratic canvassers and volunteers about the Forward Party and being an ally, etc., they sort of would smile and nod politely, but I couldn't tell how much they were really open to the idea because they already have a party alignment. Whereas I think by its very nature, an organization like Fair Districts gathers people who are more independent-minded and concerned with fairness for all parties, not just the success of their own party. So I felt like I was more successful finding like-minded people talking about the Forward Party at an event like the Fair Districts Conference than I had been in Democratic settings in the past. So that struck me as really valuable as well.
Great. Well, thank you, David. I think it made quite an impression for you to be there and to being helping to represent the Forward Party, and especially with the shirt you wore, and meeting people at their conference where they're something that they were passionate about and that's important to them and showing interest. I think that conveys a lot and helps to open up the conversation as well. Rick, was there anything that you'd like to add or share from your experience there?
I just share, I mean, they've been in existence for a really long time and had been working on it, and there was a lot to learn. Like, they shared a lot of their experiences and their learnings, and so I found that really valuable, just how Harrisburg works or doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a resource, all these different groups across the state that have like-minded people and maybe have ambitions to accomplish a lot of the change that we talk about from time to time. And sometimes as we're talking about them, we don't have the answers, but to know that there's all these other organizations that have spent years working in the trenches and doing the research and making connections, and we can help to, you know, be part of that that change actually coming into fruition. But we don't have to start from scratch because there is other work that's been done. We come alongside of other people, and I think that's a really powerful way to approach it. So yeah, thank you. I put the little flyer here to the right. If you can, I know it's small writing. For anyone in Western Pennsylvania, that's a March on Harrisburg event, helping to promote and educate about ranked choice voting. They had approached me about holding at this coffee shop that I'm involved with, and it's just great way again to strengthen relationships and partnerships is to co-host events. And they had even offered to have Forward on the flyer. And we're going to be talking about Forward there, but I actually encourage you to look. We don't need Forward on there. That might make people feel like it might leave some people out that I'd like to have there and get to meet. So we don't have to be exclusive all the time. We can promote our ideals and the things that we stand for and promote without always having to narrow the entryway of conversation. Independence of Pennsylvania, they had a great meeting last week. Nancy, if you want to take a brief moment, because you're so involved with them, and I know you're here, I want to move on to some other things, but I'd love to just give a shout out for what it is that Independence of Pennsylvania does to help engage people across the state. Are you willing?
It would be great if somebody else who was on that call would say the takeaway from our last call. Is that
Okay, sure. Yeah. Well, I was on that call, and
Yeah.
and I think Eric was there, Rick was there. There's a handful of people who are here that were also there, and there's other new faces that aren't part of this. And it's just another one of those spokes or hubs for people to connect and learn about activities that are happening across the state where you can get out and take action and meet additional people. And the leadership that Jen Bullock shows to get people connected with one another and share information and get involved with Ballot PA when they have events and stand up in front of the, over in Harrisburg. That was some of the pictures they showed from activities where they came alongside of other people throughout the year, and the plans to grow on that again coming into this current year. So lots of opportunities to connect with people, and we're glad to be part of that, and want to just encourage people to build those relationships because it makes us all stronger. Politics is, there's a few adjectives there or definitions. I don't know if these are words that you think of. They're probably words you've heard other people say when you've brought up politics. I think for a lot of people, this is what they think of. It's exhausting, it's frustrating, it's broken, it's corrupt, not for me. It's a waste of my time. But the reason why we're all taking time to talk with, do these definitions or explanations sound like things you guys hear from time to time? Maybe things that you think yourself while you're here. But certainly when you're talking with other friends that haven't been motivated to make change, I mean, it's just the reality of it. And I don't think it's wrong for us to acknowledge that that's how people feel. In fact, I think it's the starting point. It's where we got to meet people. But it's not the end of what politics is. We can also look at it as hopeful, a way to make change, a way to empower people, a way to give them a voice. And this is what our challenge is. How do we take that first definition that people are living with, the lived reality of what they're seeing, and turning it into something different? And the key to that is some of that collaboration work, working with these other organizations that exist and have done research and put information together. It's connecting friends or finding things that are passionate for people within their own community, and how can we make a bigger deal about that? and actually help to implement change, and get champions in place to make a difference and get policy in place, or get line items in a budget to be prioritized to really address the issues that are out there. And all of those things really come under the definition of organizing. A lot of people hear the word organizing. Many of you on this call have been very involved with being organizers, but we often skip over or really trying to understand or define what organizing really is. And I think that it's important for us just to pause at the end of this year and looking into 2025 and talk about, what does it mean for Forward Pennsylvania to get organized and make sure that all of the talents and interest and passion that is represented on this call and through our other friends and networks across the state, how do we take that and actually accomplish the goals of getting people in office and getting things passed that are going to protect democracy and make our communities more vibrant. So I know that the writing is a little small. I'm not sure what size screens have, but is someone willing to read the second, that middle of the top lines there? Brian, you're leaning in. You want to jump in and read that one?
Yeah, organizing depends on experience and experimentation rather than doctrine or ideology alone. Ideas are both best proven or disproven in action rather than in debate. Words are important, yes, but actions speak louder.
Yeah. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment. We're going to have a Q&A time, but I certainly would pause to hear if somebody has any comments specifically to that quote. I think it's really addresses a lot of our past year. We were experimenting, right? We've spent a couple of years trying to talk about what Forward's going to be. We had a big challenge ahead of us. We experimented. Some things worked, some things didn't. We're reviewing, how we did and talking about how to make things better for the future. But getting out there and doing things and continuing to have the conversations, and being visible and seen in the community is going to be part of how we can be more successful with future tasks and the future opportunities.
Yeah, and the groups you listed on the last page are organizing, right? That's what organizing is, like around an idea or approach. And what David was saying about why it's important that we're a party is that all those people, the people in March on Harrisburg or Ballot PA or any of the others, these are all politically motivated people that have things they care about. And those people are going to want to run for office at some point, maybe some of them are. And, when they are deciding when they're running for office, are they going to run as a Democrat or as a Republican, or are they going to run as a Forwardist, right? We are, in some ways, a platform for all these other people that, can think of us as their party. And, in the same way someone with the NRA thinks about the Republican Party, those people on the last page can think about us, the party for them, for their issues.
That's really what our goal would be, is to be the champions for those types of organizations, and helping to be the path to an office, and really helping to support forward-minded people, whether they're running as a different third party or directly as Forward or even with one of the major parties, but helping to really find a way to execute a campaign that gets those voices in office and can protect all of those things that those organizations stand for. For organizers, politics is about disagreement as much as it is about agreement. How do we deal with disagreement? Telling people that they have been duped or turned into fools and that we are right is not the organizer's way. We do not call people out. We call them into activity. Organizers are wary of exclusivity. We aim to include rather than exclude. I think that's just a very powerful quote that really should be considered as we figure out who we want to engage and why we want to engage them. There's going to be a line where we don't cross when it comes to values, but for the most part, we need to find that grace and the ability to include people. And diversity is not only welcome, it's encouraged. Has been part of what we've said from the beginning as we formed the Forward Party, and to be able to welcome people as they go through that journey of exploration, or even if they're disenchanted. There's with the results of the election, there's probably disparity even with those of us on this call today on how you feel about that. There's some that might be hopeful and okay with it. There's others that are worried. But as people navigate all of those feelings and watch as things get enacted, we need to be able to have conversations that look forward and figure out, where do we go next? How do we make the best of where we are, and how do we prepare for all situations? And again, we don't want to cross a line of values, but I think it is important that we have the patience and grace to hear people out as to why they made the decisions that they did, and be inspired to take actions that could include a lot of those voices and a lot of that passion into the work that we do in the future. Meet them in the vessel. Oh, Spencer.
Oh,
Yes.
I was just going to say, in response to the quote, it does kind of tie into something I've thought a little bit about, especially like in lieu of the election. I think it's interesting that we are sort of in an advantaged position, just because for the most part, we're kind of free of a lot of those associations that people have. And it makes those conversations, I think, easier to have from kind of a more of a fresh slate, and have more productive conversations and lead with the values. And I even notice it on these calls. It's a different dynamic than, I think most people expect and are programmed to expect from talking about politics, which is nice. You can kind of build from there, as opposed to having to represent everything that a party, already are, all the associations that are already with a party or something like that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, good. That's what we need to do. Meet them in the vestibule. You can take a minute to read this, or I can read through it. But before we even do, does someone want to take a stab of what that might mean? So this is kind of a reference to a lot of traditional church organizations, but it was an organizing technique that was adopted by a lot of unions back in the day and a lot of other politicos. And the idea is that there's often church greeters that are going to make sure that they identify new faces as they walk in the door before they even get into the sanctuary, and make sure that they feel welcome right from the beginning. Sometimes you might even meet them outside, or you might go somewhere else to invite them into church. You might walk down to the diner down the corner, but the vestibule is that area between the front door and going into the sanctuary. And it's, how do we get to those places where people who might be interested in the work that we're doing, but don't trust politics. They think it's broken. They think it's ugly. They think it doesn't work for them. They haven't come around to redefining what politics is as something hopeful. How do we meet them and engage them to a level where they can feel heard, understood, and motivated that something different can happen? And that's the idea of meeting them in the vestibule, where we can be mindful of the barriers that keep them away from being involved. What are we doing to make people maybe not feel as welcome as we would want them to be? And so that's something that we all want to be conscious of. I certainly am looking to be committed to being more conscious of that. And anyone who's here with us, we want to empower your voice and invite you to be part of helping to grow and organize Pennsylvania Forward. Engagement's required, to meet people in the vestibule, and it means having the conversations. It means going where people are. It means being visible at city council meetings and other community activities. It means, being out in public spaces or engaging online, wherever you can find a way to engage. But that's what it takes, is to truly engage with people. And then there's a little acronym hidden in those last 4 bullets underneath. And then this is really where we're putting our shoes on, when we're really getting to work, when we're lacing them up. And the idea of lacing it up, you listen, you agitate, you connect, you educate. This is how we get new people to come on board with us and help do the work to actually accomplish the goals, to create champions and get people in office. So the first thing we need to understand how people are feeling and what's important to them. And this isn't manipulative. This is real. This is authentic. We need to, there's enough going on out there that we don't need to listen in a way that we're just trying to be everything to all people, but there's enough connection with the things that we're doing to serve the people's interests and to connect with other groups and to organize, that a true listening, we should be able to get people in the right places to make a difference. The agitating is the one where, it's okay to be upset. It's okay to be frustrated and recognize that things aren't working the way that they're supposed to. It's time to do something about it. Let's do something healthy about it before it comes out in the wrong way, or that we get sucked down, or we either go numb to it or act out in a way that's not the best way to make change. Connecting is, again, that the whole organizing and all the different groups and the people that we meet as we're present and as we're out there. And then we educate one another. And we learn from others that have been involved in doing this work. This goes along with all of the activity in the community and being in the vestibule and being involved with organizations. But this is the part that really that I think we fell short on this year, and that we need to grow. As we're meeting people, we need to be able to capture some of this information. In sales, it's a CRM. We use Nation Builder for that purpose. We don't always get everybody logged in or creating an account in Nation Builder. That really is supposed to be our CRM and how we're able to communicate to people, figuring out the best ways so that we're communicating to each of you that are on this call effectively, where you're getting the right number of emails, where if you see something come out from PA Forward, you're taking the time to read it. If we're sending too much, letting us know. How can we best communicate to you so that it's effective? Because that matters. If you're feeling it or thinking it, that means other people may be also. And we want to craft our message in a way that it's meaningful and worth reading and helping to connect people. But ultimately, we need to look at our personal networks. We need to look at the local civic meetings and opportunities to be active in our community, the different advocacy groups, like those mentioned on the earlier slide, our existing database. As we're out there campaigning and collecting names for signatures for new candidates, or having conversations and gaining voter support, if there's a way to capture that information so we can communicate with them in future opportunities to help grow what we're doing across the state. Now, it's the statewide campaigns fell short, but we didn't have the database. We didn't have the existing voter profiles from past campaigns. Just because we don't want to replicate what the major parties do doesn't mean we can't learn from them. The way that they are able to be successful in reaching out to people is because they have lists and lists of voter profiles and ways to communicate with people, and they understand the different issues that have motivated people to take action before. We might not find it's going to take a long time to compile data to that level, but we want to use what resources are available or identify new resources to help ethically build lists that help us to communicate to people that would be happy to learn about the work we're doing so that we can represent them best. That's part of the organizing and what we need to do moving into 2025. The good news is there are some tools out there to help make that happen. We'll talk about that in just a second, but all of this is how we can be a champion, find a champion, support a champion. Champions are what these advocacy groups that are working on specific policy change that they want to see move through the state legislature. They need champions that can help bring this to the floor and co-sponsor and sponsor these bills and make sure that we can get them to a point of getting a vote and getting moved through the House, which can be a very long and cumbersome process. This is where we deliver on the relationships with these other groups. If we can get organized to the point of getting people into office that are easy to identify and add to the people that they've already identified over time through lobbying and conversations. And a lot of the people that we talk about might be offended by the word lobbying, even when you're not throwing money and gifts. It's still sometimes it still is roughly lobbying when you're going in and talking to your representatives and about the interests that you want to see served. And that can be innocently done, even though it's often done in a way that isn't pleasant. That's actually one of the bills that's out there now is the gift ban, and talking about how lobbying should be handled only a certain way. And how do you get people in office to vote against their own personal interests and banning gifts? Well, you find the champions and get them in office that are going to be committed and on the record to support those types of things from the beginning. People who are there truly to serve the people and not as a career or self-serving interest. So that's ultimately the kind of approach that we want to take in helping to find that type of political public servant. So part of what we're going to be doing in 2025 is a candidates and campaigns working group. There will be more information to come on this in the future. A couple tools that will be part of that, are through Country First Academy and Run for Something, and then Good Party, which you all have heard me mention a few times over the year. There's a lot of good tools that are going to help us with those leads and contacts and how to reach out to people. It's going to supercharge our efforts from where we were last year to where we can be in 2025, which then leads to even greater success in the future years. On top of this, there is a Foward tool that's being built. And we're waiting to hear more information and when that's going to roll out, but there's actually something within the national organization to help support candidate outreach and voter contact. So I'm excited to learn more about that. But part of this, we're going to talk more about this candidates and campaign working groups in January. I know Ben has mentioned this is a project. Some other people have talked about the need and the idea of having this project. It's bringing those people who are running for office together, helping them to connect so that they can share tools and resources, but with some guidance from people who have had some campaign experience to really answer or guide, but utilize one another and the strengths that we're going to be stronger if we do this together. So with that, I'm going to pause for questions and answers here. So let me just stop sharing for a minute. Hopefully you guys see the connection that I do from the report that was provided last week, reviewing this past year and what we want to do next year. And this is a different way of looking at a lot of the same things and talking about what action it really takes for us to level up. And this is kind of the call that we're looking for, to be able to have some success in getting some people into local offices, as we have local cycles here in Pennsylvania in 25, and be prepared and already have our eye on 26 state legislative races.
Christian, I put the link in the chat for Wednesday's national call, which I don't know if they'll be covering the tool that you were just talking about, but that should be a good time to wrap up and celebrate 2024 with them also.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Nancy.
Yes, thanks. It occurred to me as you were talking, Christian, it sounds like we're positioning Forward as the political arm, so to speak, of the reform movement. Would you agree with that characterization?
We're not the advocacy group. A lot of us are inspired by the different things that need to change to help protect democracy and help to serve the interests of the people. But in order for those things to become reality, we need people in office that are committed to those. And so that's where the candidate pledge is inspired by that. It holds certain things. We're not asking for platforms to be specific all the way across the board, but we are asking commitment to certain values that are representative of a lot of these different pro-democracy initiatives. So yes, we want to be the political party that is helping get in office those champions that are going to make sure that the changes that we see as valuable are accomplished. And with the idea that that protects the people's interests and is giving voice to people, and we're not defining their platform beyond where we need to, because they need to be held accountable by their constituents. And as long as their values do not cross that line, we want the candidate to be able to present their own platform that represents the people that they serve.
Thank you. That's great.
David?
The discussion prompted something else I thought was worth sharing from the Fair Districts Conference. I truthfully went primarily to promote Forward. I didn't even really know what would be discussed there, but it was eye-opening for me, particularly one session about legislative dysfunction in Pennsylvania. I didn't realize that in some ways Pennsylvania is uniquely, or at least unusually, dysfunctional. For example, our legislators are apparently the third highest paid in the nation, but pass very little legislation compared to the fact that they work full-time and are so highly paid. The Fair Districts organization actually has a side project, an initiative called Fix Harrisburg, that grew out of their close attention to the districting bills that they were following, because of course they would try to promote a bill for fair districting. They would try to follow the progress of that bill through the legislature. And then sometimes it would just stop, and there was no clear reason why. Maybe it passed one chamber and almost unanimously and got to the other one, and then it just wasn't taken up for consideration. And there's no public reason given for why that is. So through that, Fair Districts became aware of all of this dysfunction, and their Fix Harrisburg initiative is an attempt to address that. And as unfortunate as that is, it's an opportunity for us, because another thing that we can look for in the candidates that we hope to attract and endorse are the ones who are directly promising to address some of the problems that Fix Harrisburg is pointing out. Oh, and a quick side note, the Fair Districts Conference said that they would make all of the videos of all of the sessions available afterwards. I assume that those will be publicly available. So when all of those are shared with me as an attendee, I'll make sure that I share them on the Forward Party Slack so that other people can see them. I would definitely encourage everyone to at least look at that one about the legislative dysfunction, because there were some really eye-opening statistics in there that I cannot remember in their entirety.
Thanks, David. Ben?
Yeah, speaking about candidates, if you're thinking about possibly running for office in 2025, there are some dates coming up. If you, some people might, we do support people running for office, even if it's with a major party. The first day to circulate nomination petitions, if you're with them, is February 18th, and that lasts until March 11th. But at the day after that is when the Ford Party can start collecting signatures for people who want to run as a Fordist on the ballot. And they will have until August 1st to collect all the signatures. And I just wanted to keep those dates in mind, because they're going to be here before you know it. And having that on putting that on the radar is something I wanted to bring up.
Thanks, Ben. One of the races that has been brought up a number of times over the year for people to consider is judge of elections. It often goes unopposed, so to be able to book some wins. I'll be honest, for me, booking a win, I had mixed feelings of how much good that was going to do for us. However, I gained a new, it does help. It's nice to be able to say we have some people in elected office, even if it's unopposed. But I think an even bigger win, that's one of those vestibules. If you serve as the judge of elections, you're meeting a lot of people in your district. You're meeting the people in the county clerk's office. You're making the relationships that are going to be very valuable for future support. If you're identifying other candidates, if you'd consider a different race yourself, or to meet somebody that's a potential candidate, to understand complaints and issues within the district that could even just, stir up the right kind, agitate the right kind of conversations, to bring people out and get them involved and be part of organizing a group to take action within the community. So sometimes the holding office can benefit a lot of different ways. It's something worth considering. And it's one of the lowest demand on your time, because there's the 2 days of actual service and probably 2 additional days of training. So for the most part, you can expect 4 days a year that it would take of your time to be able to serve in that role. But there are other roles as well. You can look that up on your local municipality website, county websites, or Good Party is a good resource for being able to see what most offices that are available, although it's not fully exhaustive. So. Are there other questions at this time? I'm going to go back to Sharon just for a second, because I had oh, Spencer, go ahead.
I was just wondering if there's like a generally agreed upon like best resource to try to get someone just to be exposed to the ideas in Foward. Like I've recommended Yang's book, but sometimes it's a lot of buy-in to expect someone to read a 300-page book. It works sometimes, but I was wondering if there's like a YouTube channel or some kind of content that you recommend.
That's a great question. My best success has been over the long haul, like conversations, drips and drops here and there. But that's not a good answer. We need something better than that. So I'd love to hear from anybody else on this call that might have good suggestions on how to help explain. Brian.
Well, last month's meeting, we approached it a little differently. We really tried to have our November statewide call be kind of a recap, a reintroduction to Pennsylvania Forward. So if you could get someone to watch an hour-long video, that would probably be a great place to start. But I completely agree. Like I used to be more active in the climate change advocacy groups, and a big part of what we did in them is learn a specific PowerPoint presentation, learn to tell it, right? This is like a 10-minute like spiel on like what the proposal was, and then you would role play, and you say it to me and I say it to you, and you try and like learn this like pitch backwards and forwards. So it is something that I've thought before that we could try something like that. If we could get together a 5 or 10-minute like official pitch, even if everybody didn't do it exactly the same, if we put together a video like that you could take and do it in your own way, maybe that would be a useful thing to have. I've tried a couple times to start writing something like that, and I go off on a tangent, and I haven't nailed the exact thing yet. But if that's something you think we should work on, that I'd be happy to.
That reminds me of there was a number of videos circulating around on YouTube back 3 years ago, but pre-merger days. And some of those might capture a lot of the same primary, might be able to be repurposed or.
Thank you for taking the.
But yeah, that's a great suggestion, Spencer. I'm glad to hear you've already been thinking about that some, Brian. It would be incredibly useful for sure.
Is National been making any sort of short explainer videos? What the Foward Party is all about? I haven't really checked for their YouTube channel or anything like that.
I have not seen an updated version of something like that in quite some time. I'm not aware of one, but that doesn't mean it's not out there or that one of the other states hasn't created one that could easily be adapted. So it's a worthwhile, it's a really good thing to flag. And probably there's some work done somewhere that we could, you know, kind of be well on our way of getting that taken care of. Bob, were you putting your hand up? Yep. Okay.
I was going to say there are some on YouTube, Forward Party and Andrew Yang on YouTube, but it's not just, it's a bit unorganized, but you can still get something from it. So you could try searching on YouTube. And like I said, I make a video about us. I just don't know that much about multimedia. If I knew more, I would. So I do a lot of writing, if that would help. I could write to you, see if I can tell you whatever. You know, I'll send you my email. You can write to me if you want to, and I could answer some questions about my experience, okay?
Thanks, Bob. I'm going to hop back over to the last couple of slides for the presentation for just a second, and then we can open up for more conversation if there's any. So these are the action steps. And this is one that I'd probably love to, if you have any answers, you know, go to the vestibule and identify some leads. But part of that is identifying what the vestibules are in your life. Where are those places where you might be able to find people that are politically inclined, maybe aren't taking action currently. There might be an obstacle or a reason why they're not. But if they knew there was a new way to take action, and that removes part of the barriers that keeps them out. Or if there was a way to help them connect with the thing that was most passionate to them, it's a way that we can invite them in. Meet with another Fowardist, whether that's somebody that you already know, somebody on this call, or if you want to be connected for a one-on-one, whether it's with leadership or just somebody else that lives near you. Because if you can start to build a relationship with someone in your community, you might be able to attract that third or fourth, fifth person and become a little hub of activity that gives you people to work with when there's opportunities to run campaigns. But get together and discuss your most optimistic take regarding the election outcome. There's a lot of people who just are exasperated. They're so glad that the election's over, or they want to voice their frustrations or concerns, or just turn off politics altogether. Well, let's talk about what good can come of it. What's the things are you most hopeful for? And there's a lot of different ways of how to answer that. There's some people that are very optimistic. There's others that might be a struggle to answer. But if we share ideas with one another, hopefully we can look and see where that positive energy might come from. Identify a race in 25 that you wish had an additional or better candidate running. So we often talk about encouraging people to run for office. Not everyone is ever going to be comfortable or willing to do that, and we understand. That doesn't mean we want you to go away. We're not everyone has to be the candidate, but if you can help identify a race that should have additional competition, let's put somebody on the record on what they stand for, or challenge somebody, or maybe help somebody win. That's going to, you know, be a better representative for their constituents. We'd love to hear or learn about that. Tell someone you're hopeful about that the state of politics could get better, and then see what the reaction is. Like, walk up to someone, you're standing in line to buy your coffee sometime next week on a cold day. So you know what? I think politics, it can get better. But if everyone would be willing to try to tackle at least one of these things, we can make a spark and create a conversation that can lead to change. There's going to be work to organize and bring people together. But I really think we can make a difference and have a great 2025. David.
I ended up accidentally starting to do one of those things as a result of the Fair Districts Conference. I struck up a conversation that led to my being invited to join their communications team, which I have very slightly and tentatively done. I'm not involved in any big capacity. I told them honestly that I have limited time. But just out of that conversation, I went to their site. I filled out their volunteer form. I'm on their list now. And I think that trying to at least sign up for the mailing lists of those other organizations to see what they're talking about, what issues they're currently pushing, gives us opportunities to possibly attack the same issues with them. But I also hope that something good will come out of the fact that I'm on the volunteer list now. Even though I don't have much time to spare, I'm really hoping that someday in the future, I'll have a chance to make a connection between Fair Districts and Forward through the fact that I'm now on the volunteer lists of both. That's another idea for people who are listening to this. Either just sign up for the mailing lists of those activist organizations so you know what they're talking about, or if you feel like taking the extra step, actually put your name and information in as a volunteer so you can be on their volunteer list too.
Great. Thanks, David. Anybody want to share a thought about maybe a vestibule in your life or somewhere where you might visit or how you're going to attack one of those action steps? If we could just hear from one or two more and wrap up the call, I'd love to hear some actions that people might take after this meeting, if you're willing. I hope that you'll consider it. And hopefully it helps to make sense and to think about, rather than organizing being just a word, that we can really take the challenge on of going out and organizing in the new year. Bob.
I still have my forward signs. I'm still keeping it up. I'm hoping that might get people to ask me. So would that be considered a vestibule?
That's a way of reaching out and inviting people to have a conversation. Let's talk about what could be new and different. Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Rick.
This is minor, but you mentioned judge of elections. Another very minor position is inspector of elections. So I plan to run in 25 for that.
Great, great. Yeah, thank you. Incredible. Well, thank you all
That's
for
a
taking-
new one to me. What's the distinction between judge of elections and inspector of elections?
Judge of elections runs the election, is responsible for making all the final calls. Inspector of the elections, there's actually a majority inspector and a minority inspector, which are intended to represent the two major parties, just making sure what the judge is doing is okay. With the minority inspector being an especially important role because the judge is probably of the majority party, again, assuming both parties were running candidates, which we know they don't do. And so there's all sorts of rules. So I was a appointed minority inspector at one point. I wasn't elected, but they have a lot of dropouts. There's a bunch of rules. I have a bunch of election material in this office I'm sitting in right now because I have to keep it for 5 years. So anyway, it's a real position. There are rules. They have a lot less responsibility than the judge of elections.
Yeah, and the reason the Ford Party is putting more emphasis on the judge of elections is because, like you said, the two major parties are the ones who those inspector of elections are usually open to. So if you're not with the major parties, your only option is the judge of election for an elected position.
Though in my district and in a number of them in Lancaster County, at least, inspector of elections runs with no candidates. So last cycle, nobody ran for inspector of elections in my district. And it's actually a precinct-based position. So if nobody runs, on the fly write-in candidate wins. So my thought is, yeah, if I go in as forward, I very well might be the only candidate on the ballot. And then I'll end up as majority inspector if, if that goes down the way it is. And if one of the major parties puts somebody in, still, in the way that election works is the top 2 candidates get a position. So would still get a position that way. So there's, requires them not running 2 candidates, but last cycle they ran 0.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, thank you all for taking the time to hang out for an hour tonight, or almost an hour. Really appreciate seeing everyone before the holidays. Enjoy the holiday season. I hope that there's something valuable shared here tonight with you, and I look forward to working with all of you in 2025. Have a great night.
Night.